Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of WWE's Elimination Chamber 2015. But before I get into this pay-per-view, I just wanted to inform you that I have finally decided to start watching NXT on a full-time basis. I've seen the majority of the specials, and they're incredibly well done, but I always feel like my enthusiasm is being held back because I'm just not very familiar with the characters or storylines or the reason they're feuding. These characters are feuding, and that's because I don't watch every NXT show, and I'm missing a lot there. So my plan has been for a while to wait until they released their newest special, which in this case was Unstoppable, and then that's usually when storylines start taking new and different turns. Different people start feuding, and it's just easier to catch up. It's really hard to get into a new brand of wrestling just from any point because you don't know the storylines, you don't know why you're supposed to care, and so on. But I figured that would be the best time for me to jump into NXT, and so far it's worked out well. I've been able to keep up. So in the future, I'll go ahead and start reviewing the NXT pay-per-views or their equivalent of pay-per-views as well. I did watch NXT Unstoppable. Not NXT's best show. It was good, but not great by their standards. Still better than Payback and Extreme Rules, and I thought those were fine shows as well. But Unstoppable wasn't amazing, but it was good, and if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. If you haven't watched NXT yet, you should try to view that as well because it has some pretty phenomenal stuff in it. So moving on to Elimination Chamber. You know what? I have to give WWE some credit here because for all the many problems I have with the storylines going into the Elimination Chamber, I thought the booking was surprisingly well done. I was really interested in seeing the majority of these matches. There were some really unique pairings, some pretty innovative gimmicks. I'm not a big fan of the Elimination Chamber concept, even though I'm perfectly fine with it. At the absolute least, WWE uses it sparingly. Once a year is more than enough. I don't think they should have done it this year just because I don't like it when only 2 weeks go by before the next pay-per-view. Just too much. But if they had brought it back next year, I'd be perfectly content to see an Elimination Chamber based show. But even if I'm not the biggest fan of the gimmick because it is very gimmicky, I do like how you could see these different styles clashing, and there's more room to actually do more wrestling than you'd get in a Battle Royale or Royal Rumble. But all the Raws and SmackDowns leading into this, there were some good ones, but for the most part they weren't anything special. But they did do a good job at pumping me up for this pay-per-view. I was really eager to see it, much more than Payback or Extreme Rules, maybe even more so than WrestleMania, because I thought WrestleMania was going to suck in so many ways. But Elimination Chamber, I was really excited. So the kickoff show began with Stardust versus Zack Ryder. And the match was perfectly acceptable, but it's the type of match you'd easily see on Raw or SmackDown. The only difference is Zack Ryder gets more time to show off his moves. If this had appeared on Raw or SmackDown, it would have been over in like a minute, and Ryder probably would have been squashed. Zack Ryder is one of those guys who I always feel like he deserves better, that I would like to see more of him, but then if I got more of him, I'd want to see less of him. Whenever I see him talk, deliver any kind of promo, he seems very enthusiastic. He does have a certain amount of charisma and quite a bit of personality, but it's maybe a bit too over the top to where if I ever hear him speak for too long, I just start getting a little annoyed. Otherwise, he's got a pretty good look. He's in really good shape. He does have an interesting arsenal of moves at his disposal. even if he's not generally allowed to show them. It's just, he's one of those guys who I would like to see him more in the mid card, but I can't totally blame WWE for not wanting to use him too much, because while he's a good worker with a certain amount of color to him, I don't know. It just seems like if he's overexposed, I would hate him in the same. Well, I don't want to say in the same way I hate Ziggler, because that's not really true. But it just, I don't definitely see main event material there. I do remember I missed his big first push, but I do remember when The Soup, a TV show that I love, made fun of that bit where he's like either on crutches or in a wheelchair, and he walks in on his girlfriend kissing John Cena. And that was a very cheesy ass moment, and from what I hear, that derailed his career, that whole storyline. But otherwise, I'm pretty indifferent to Zack Ryder. As for Stardust, I feel WWE really missed an opportunity with him. It seemed like he was getting over around Fastlane, but then afterwards they just aborted that storyline with Goldust, and suddenly he became a jobber. Sometimes a glorified jobber, but generally not even that. Like last I saw, he was losing to R-Truth. Not a good place for your career. I'd be perfectly fine with a Stardust push if they did it right. I think Cody Rhodes does have quite a bit of talent. And I think the gimmick can be kind of unsettling and creepy, while at the same time, being pretty comical. But it's just WWE has to be careful. They have to book him correctly. They'd have to give him the right amount of time, but not too much time. And I just don't trust WWE right now, especially in regards to their writers. So if they choose to give Stardust a push, I'd be more comfortable with that than a Zack Ryder push, but it doesn't really matter because it's probably not going to happen. But in terms of the match itself, like I said, it was perfectly fine. Nothing amazing, but moving on. Daniel Bryan gets interviewed by The Miz in a Miz TV segment. Now, whereas Ryder vs. Stardust was acceptable, this was stupid. The only person I thought who came out looking good was, ironically, The Miz. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of The Miz as an in-ring talent, but I do think that he's one of the best talkers in the business. And he was perfect at being the total douchebag Miz that we're used to. However, it made Daniel Bryan look like a petty bully, because Daniel Bryan just kind of gets fed up by The Miz, and decides to bring in the meta powers. And he specifically says, because I figured you'd be a total dick, I had prepared for this, so I brought out these two guys to beat you up because I can't beat you up myself. That's not very good babyface behavior, and it's not like Daniel Bryan's one of those morally ambiguous babyfaces. Like, Cena has so many odd moments that it makes you wonder if the character isn't as nice as he pretends to be, which should make a heel turn if that ever happens, relatively easy to swallow. But Daniel Bryan has always, or at least as a good guy, generally been portrayed as more valiant than this. So it just makes him seem kind of like a prat. And then the meta powers come out, and at first you're just thinking, okay, well, it's Macho Man to get revenge on The Miz. But then Macho Man starts getting his ass kicked, so great job, man. And then, Curtis Axel has to kind of save him, and together they beat up The Miz. So good job. It took two of you to bring down this one villain who's generally not portrayed as that strong anyway. One of the things that drove me insane about The Miz and Mizdow versus the Usos storyline is, while Mizdow was goofing off in the outside, Miz was more or less holding off the Usos on his own, and the announcers never really commentated on that. They were too busy praising Mizdow for whatever reason, or criticizing The Miz for his heelish tactics, ignoring the fact that he's taking on the best tag team in the division on his own. But so instead of making him look strong, it makes them look weak, and this is sort of the same kind of logic here. So I thought that was dumb, but whatever. So on the main card, it began with the Splash, the tag team Elimination Chamber match with the New Day, the Ascension, Primetime Players, Cesaro Kid, the Lucha Dragons, Los Matadores. Why is Los Matadores here? They're just tag team jobbers. They aren't really interesting. They get no reaction from anybody. I would have much rather have seen the Meta Powers in this spot, because the Meta Powers at least feel more relevant. They get more of a fan reaction, even though I'm not a big fan of that gimmick. Los Matadores, it's just run out of steam if it ever had any, and they need to break that team up now. Have one retain the gimmick working with El Torito, and they could be a tag team, since El Torito is the only thing that stands out about them anyway. And the other can go on and do something else. But otherwise, they have no reason for being here other than for El Torito to have one spot. Big whoop. There was no reason to invest in them as potential winners, because we see them as nothing but jobbers, and they just seem kind of unnecessary with the Lucha Dragons right now, because the timing of Los Matadores always seems off to me. Like, they want to work a much faster paced style of wrestling, and nobody wants to play ball with them. So the people whom they're fighting, they don't sell it very well. So it makes Los Matadores' techniques look weak. While in other times, it really seems like Los Matadores, they're holding back. And I always just found that strange. Maybe Los Matadores, they're the best wrestlers in the division by far, for all I know, but their primary job is to make other people look good, so they're just not allowed to really show off their skills. I don't know, but the Lucha Dragons they're just much more exciting. Their moveset is so much cooler. Their athleticism stands out more. Everything about them makes Los Matadores seem inferior in comparison. I do feel that the Lucha Dragons need to be used more effectively in storylines. So far, we've just gotten great match quality from them, which is enough. Kalisto in particular is amazing. Sin Cara, I'm not a big fan of Sin Cara as a solo performer, but he does really work well here. I do like how him and Kalisto have different styles. You don't realize this at first glance, but Sin Cara is more power-based than people tend to realize, whereas Kalisto's a hardcore high flyer. And Sin Cara, he looks good, but he always makes a point to make Kalisto look better, which is perfect, because his only real job is to get Kalisto over. But I wish, there was more promo time dedicated to these guys. I want to hear more about their personalities, their motivations. I want to hear them banter with their opponents more. I want them to get put in more just storylines in general. That's not just them getting into the ring and clashing with whatever tag team. But otherwise, I totally am fine with them being in the tag team title scene right now, because they are amazing in the ring. A lot of people did not like how they were taken out by the Ascension after Los Matadores were removed. I'm okay with that as long as WWE starts doing something with the Ascension. Because the Lucha Dragons, it doesn't seem like WWE knows entirely what to do with them right now. But much like Ryback for the longest time, they want to present them as a strong team that gets to show off their abilities. But they don't really want to put the belts on them yet. And I understand this. Hopefully they'll get that shot soon again. But, but at the same time, the Ascension really could use a meaningful win. I've been watching, when I think about the NXT specials where the Ascension put on some phenomenal matches, and I realized that even though the Ascension have been involved in great matches, they themselves really aren't that great. Their wrestling styles are generally used to be like the straight man for a more colorful opponent, like the Lucha Dragons. They're stiff, they're brutal, and they're fully ordinary in their presentation. But when they take on, somebody with a more unique style, whether it's Finn Balor or the Lucha Dragons, that almost bland presentation of theirs, in terms of their moveset and stuff, it only makes their opponents look better. And what really benefited the Ascension was how they were booked. They were booked as dominant and threatening. So not only were they, the wall characters for the more interesting opponents to play off of, they were so threatening and dangerous that, their opponents, if they went over, it really meant something. And I feel that they would have been booked the same way if they were bigger, which is, Vince McMahon's preferences, but they aren't very large guys, so I don't think, Vince or the creative team really could buy them as this dominating force, and that just really hurt them in the long run. They've been more or less a comedic duo, even though they aren't being overtly funny, and that's just sort of buried them, unfortunately. Nobody really likes them. They are not over with the crowds at all. The reactions they get are very indifferent, and it's not really their fault. It's just that, they've been booked so horrendously, whereas the booking was probably their greatest attribute in NXT. But I would like to see them, reclaim that glory, be booked as dangerous, threatening champions, but it's not going to be easy. So whether this was a good idea to have them go over the Lucha Dragons in this match remains to be seen. I'll say that. If they continue to be demoted to extra, then I will not like it. If they're getting some kind of push out of this, I will be fine with it. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Kalisto, he had this spot where he climbs up on the very top and drops down on everybody. A lot of people were impressed by this. I thought it looked rather silly because, everybody looks up and they see him and they're just like, for a good few seconds before he finally drops onto them. I kept thinking, why don't they just all move away? I'll tell you why, because they obviously had to catch Kalisto. But the timing was just really off, so it looked awkward, and it reminds us, the audience, that yes, wrestling is fake. It draws attention to this fact, which is never a good thing. I'm thinking, it's really nice of the Ascension to want to stick around to catch Kalisto. But anyway, so after the Ascension was taken out, then it was Cesaro and Kid. I was not really thrilled when they turned face, even though I think they've been doing it pretty well. What I don't like is they haven't talked a whole lot, and I do think that they're really good personalities. Tyson Kidd is much better at cutting a promo than Cesaro, but Cesaro is really good with his body language. He does have a significant amount of personality that is very expressive without him actually having to say something, but as faces, it just seems like they've been used more as props for the New Day than as characters. But still, they're phenomenal performers, and at least they're being presented as incredibly important. They had some real cool moments within this match. So yeah, of course I'd like to see, them get more promo time and get better storylines. But, we'll just have to see where they go. I'd be interested in them taking on the Ascension. I think that would benefit the Ascension, and if the Ascension utilize their strengths real well, it will just make Cesaro and Kid look better, regardless of who goes over. And then, of course, the New Day. Even though I think it was a little early for them to get the titles, I really think WWE has done a great job at making them the most annoying heels possible, but in a good way. They've been very entertaining as the villains. They're the most over team right now. And it's funny how they began as a total flop, but people are paying attention to them more than any other team in the entire division. And you know this because, while other teams are fighting, like in, I think it was SmackDown, they had a lumberjack match where it was Cesaro and Kid versus the Lucha Dragons, two of the best teams of the division fighting, and people are chanting New Day sucks just because they're out there as part of the lumberjacks. And that just goes to show, how over they are as villains. And I think their craftiness has been rather creative. I like when they, had Xavier Woods sneak in and roll up, I think it was Tyson Kidd, even though he wasn't officially in the match. I much prefer that level of craftiness than like the Seth Rollins kind of craftiness, where it's just all the same shit, where he'll get J&J security or Kane to attack his opponent from behind or whatever. So I've really dug New Day, and I love how, well, I don't love this, but it's interesting how, like, going into this match, it wasn't about their tensions with the other teams. It's just focusing on the New Day themselves. And they'll have the New Day interact with other wrestlers who have nothing to do with the storyline, and get put into matches with, like, I think they were against Reigns and Orton, or Reigns and Ambrose, I don't remember who, or they'll just get involved with other people's storylines, and I think they've done that really well. Primetime players. I'm fine with the primetime players getting pushed, because they're the only tag team right now that has been allowed to really show off their personalities, and they could keep up with the New Day in that regard. I enjoyed their banter when they were both arguing on the commentary, at the commentary table. My only problem is that it doesn't seem like primetime players have wrestled enough. So I think they should have had more matches going into this. I honestly forgot what much of their moves looked like, because the last match I saw of theirs was when they beat the Ascension, and that was a relatively short match that just had the Ascension dominating until Darren Young stole the win. So it's kind of weird seeing them here again, where they got a lot more time. And I was like, oh yeah, I did know that kind of move. So I didn't mind that these were the last two teams together. Primetime players are pretty entertaining. It's just that they should have been built up to be more credible as, a much stronger team, because when you think about it, Titus O'Neil was very low on the card for a while, where he barely won any matches. In fact, he probably lost more than Kane, and Kane loses a lot of matches. But in terms of just the quality of the match, it was kind of a clusterfuck at times. There were some sloppy moments. But yeah, I thought most of the teams got their own times to shine. I liked all the different, like, team techniques they would use together. The majority of the relevant teams got to use, techniques together. Like the Ascension, New Day, primetime players, Cesaro Kid, they all have moves that really utilize the fact that they're in a team together. So yeah, it was a fun match. I really enjoyed it, even if it was pretty messy at times. And I agree, I predicted this too. I knew the New Day would win, and I think that was a smart move. I think it's too early for them to drop the belts as of now. I'm looking at my notes, and I'm not seeing anything else I could say. It was fast-paced, too. That's another thing I should say, is that there was never a dull moment in this match, and that's going to be important compared to later matches. Then we had, the Diva Championship. God, this fucking sucked. The match itself was very, very boring. In itself, I'd say it was mostly mediocre, but in a boring, mediocre kind of way. I was not invested in these storylines. I could hear them calling their spots at different moments. The finish was very anticlimactic. A lot of the moves looked sloppy. One thing I really did not like about this storyline is, for one, why is Stephanie bullying the Bella Twins? Nikki sold out. Why does WWE forget this kind of shit? So why is Stephanie, sending Brie to counseling to screw Nikki over when they're supposed to be friends and there was no sign of a falling out? I just hate the lack of continuity there. But she seems like an afterthought in her own storyline. This feud has primarily focused on Naomi and Paige, and don't get me wrong, they actually had some great interactions together. I really liked, I think it was a SmackDown, their first major confrontation on a talking level. Naomi was surprisingly effective giving a heelish promo, whereas Paige was also very badass in her counterpoints as well, and they just worked incredibly well together. But then, Nikki was just sort of there. And I really was glad she retained just for that reason. I know a lot of people don't like Nikki, and indeed she is probably the worst worker of these three women. But when she loses the belt, it has to be a more bombastic moment. It should not be in a three-way. It should be in a one-on-one match. And it needs to feel like a big deal. Whereas if she was like the third wheel in her own championship match, that's bad. That's like what happened with Bad News Barrett at WrestleMania. There's no excuse for that kind of shit. So that was pretty weak. I did not enjoy this match at all, and I thought the storylines going into it were pretty shitty. Naomi is getting better as a heel, though. I still think her moveset needs work, but she's coming into her own as a personality. I said before that they were kind of writing her as AJ Lee 2.0, but I've changed my mind. She has developed her own character, which gives me hope that, yeah, she can make a very good heel in time. Owens versus Cena. Now, this is one that I was really eager to see, but I was sure that Cena would win. In retrospect, there were signs that this probably wasn't going to be the case. I didn't realize that this wasn't a title match until shortly before I saw the match, and that seemed like a waste. But for Owens to go over Cena, they would have to have some long-term plans for how this would affect his time in NXT. What is it going to be like seeing him with the United States champion in NXT? Would it get defended in NXT? Would he be on the main roster more to defend his U.S. championship? It could be done, and that would be really cool, but they'd have to really put a lot of thought into it, and I don't think WWE thinks that far ahead. So that was a disappointment, but it was a really good match. It started off a little sloppy. Their styles didn't seem to be meshing with each other very well, and I think there was way too much finisher kickouts. I don't like seeing Cena kick out of the pop-up powerbomb. I don't like seeing Owens kick out of the Attitude Adjustment. I don't like seeing everybody kick out of the Attitude Adjustment. Cena really probably needs a new finisher just for that reason, because everybody seems to survive it, and it no longer really seems like an effective finisher anymore. So even if it was just a variation of the Attitude Adjustment, much like how Dean Ambrose changed what Dirty Deeds looked like, that would be enough. They need to do something there. But Owens is awesome. When I first saw him, I was disappointed because I was building him up to be like Brock Lesnar 2.0 in my mind. And when I finally saw him in action, he just seemed kind of pudgy, a bit too soft-spoken. It just wasn't my kind of heel. But then the more I watched him, the more I realized that he probably has the best grasp on in-ring, or not in-ring, but just wrestling psychology in general. I found his way of speaking to actually be kind of creepy and unsettling. He just does such a good job at making you want to see him get his ass kicked. He's this dominant villain, but at the same time, he will back off and be kind of a coward. And yet, once he gets on the offensive, he's kind of scary and brutal. He's the perfect kind of two-faced villain. He's not over the top in his villainy like Seth Rollins is. He tries to act polite, but it just makes him seem more unsettling because it's obviously fake, but it's not overly fake. So I've been really impressed with his promos. I loved how he kind of put John Cena in his place during their first interaction. And John Cena is a great talker who usually, can, outwit his opponents in delivering, his promos. But Owen Wilson pretty much shut him up. And then with this match, it was a very intense, brutal matchup that was very good on a storytelling level. Owens really got to show off his moveset. that moonsault was beautiful. And he shows off, like, old techniques, but they're new twists on these old techniques. And it just made him look like a very different kind of performer. There is nobody on the roster like Kevin Owens, and that is great for him right now. And Cena looked good as well. And even though Kevin Owens got some cheers, you heard the fight Owens fight chants. Cena got kept the attention on him as well. So both men came out of this match looking really good. Fans mostly seem to be on Cena's side at parts, which you don't see too often very more. Really, the sad thing about this, though, is it made Rusev seem kind of irrelevant, because Rusev was built up to be this dominant heel only to badly lose to Cena. Whereas now that Kevin Owens has shown up, it makes me wonder if Rusev's going to be totally demoted, because now Kevin Owens is presumably going to play this part. But I loved this match so much. It to me was the show stealer, and you should definitely watch it if you choose not to watch Elimination Chamber. Oh God, the decompression match. Neville versus Bo Dallas. So this was kind of a stupid idea. I was hoping that this would be a great matchup just because, apparently they've done some really good work in the past. In fact, Neville became NXT champion after defeating Bo Dallas. But I wasn't really sure if this was a promotion for Bo or if it was a demotion for Neville. I don't really think it's either. Bo Dallas just is irrelevant in the WWE right now. I think he can succeed as a mid-card performer. He is entertaining in that capacity, whereas I believe WWE thinks that Neville can be important. I'm not sure if that's the case, because Neville is a phenomenal in-ring talent, but he's not much of a talker. So in a way, he's like the total opposite of Bo, who doesn't seem to be that great in the ring, but he is a much better talker. And I do believe that you need much more personality to survive in the main event scene. Plus, Neville's not a young guy, really. Eventually his body is going to start breaking down, and he won't be able to perform these amazing athletic abilities. So it's like, I suspect Neville will never really break into the main event scene, but he can become a very important upper-level mid-carder. So Neville won. I expected that. I think everybody did. It was just average. It's the type of match that just fill up time before a more relevant match happens. The only thing that really stood out to me was when Bo starts crying. He starts freaking out, and you could hear him yell. That was pretty entertaining. But otherwise, it was one of the weaker matches on the card, but I think it was designed to be that way. It's a cool-down match. So after we get something as awesome as Owens versus Cena, this will be when the fans can, relax, have a piss break, whatever, and then it goes on to a much bigger match. The Intercontinental Champion Chamber match. Oh God, poor Rusev. So the Lana storyline was terrible. I think it's too early for her to split up from Rusev. It's too early for her to turn babyface. I was hoping maybe she'd betray Ziggler, and that would bring back that level of heat that she needed. But it didn't really make sense for her to go to Ziggler. I mean, what would draw her to him? He's nothing like Rusev, and if you feel maybe she was very fond of Rusev as a person, but Rusev and Ziggler, they're nothing alike in personality. If it was just a matter of her wanting to go to the most strongest dominant male, Ziggler's not it. It would make more sense if she went to Cena to get Rusev jealous. So that none of this just makes sense to me. It's just very badly written, and it makes everybody look bad. It makes, obviously Rusev's supposed to be the bad guy, but Lana's seeming just too manipulative to be, for this face turn to work. Ziggler just seems kind of seedy, like he's taking advantage of a situation. So nobody comes out of this storyline looking good, but it doesn't really matter either because Rusev got injured and was taken out of the match. He was replaced by Mark Henry. A lot of people thought Bray Wyatt would be the guy, but I'm glad that it wasn't Bray because I don't know. It just seems like unless they're going to put the belt on Bray, he has no reason to be in this match. But Mark Henry, I thought was a fine choice. I still don't like how it's like every time he shows up, he's either going to be a face or heel with no real continuity. Like, it wasn't that long ago that we were supposed to hate him, but now we're supposed to like him, I guess. This match wasn't very good. It was actually the biggest disappointment of the roster. It wasn't bad. I liked it more than the Divas match. I liked it more than Neville versus Bo, but it was just kind of awkwardly paced. The crowd didn't seem to be all that into it. In regards to the storylines, Bad News Barrett was the first to get eliminated, and it pissed me off. Why make him King of the Ring if you're just going to do this to him? It just makes King of the Ring seem so much more irrelevant now. I mean, he's been losing to everybody. He lost to Ryback last week. He lost to R-Truth last week. Apparently, he loses to Roman Reigns in this last Raw. I haven't seen it yet. But he just keeps losing, and he loses the first. I was hoping that because he kept losing, that he would be the surprise winner in this match. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I hoped. And he ended up being the first taken out by R-Truth. So that made me angry. And then I think R-Truth was taken out next. Why is R-Truth in this matchup? It's not like he's been used that well in the build-up either. His matches haven't been particularly exciting. He hasn't gotten a whole lot of talking time. At least with the Intercontinental Ladder match at WrestleMania, he was showing up a lot on commentary and at least being able to show off his personality. You don't get that here. He just seems like padding, but there were other people who would have fit better here. Like, everybody was talking about why not Neville. Well, maybe it was because Neville apparently had hurt himself in a previous match. That may have been why his Bo Dallas match was pretty subpar. Or maybe it had just been done to protect him so he doesn't lose. I don't know, but there were a lot of other better choices I would have had in this spot than R-Truth, because he's not going to win, and we know this. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention to who got taken out in what order afterwards. Mark Henry looked like an idiot because, at one point he just stops wrestling and he just watches everybody else fight, and that was kind of intelligent. That was kind of cool. But then he actually saves Ziggler at one point. Why? The only thing I can guess is that spot was originally designed for Rusev, and the reason Rusev would have broken up the count was because he wanted to beat Ziggler himself. But if that was the case, why didn't they change that? It just made Mark Henry look like a fucking moron. Otherwise, nothing about Mark Henry looked good in this match. Like, at one point, I think he got his finisher on Sheamus, who then promptly no-sold it and brogue kicked him, and I think took him out at that point. So he wasn't very well utilized. Who else was there? I know there was Ryback, Sheamus, and Ziggler. Ziggler never got any real chance to shine. There's this one part where Ryback lifts him up in a suplex and just holds him there for seemingly 10 minutes. And it's like, I'm supposed to be impressed at how strong Ryback is, but like the fans weren't really responding. I was getting just kind of bored and annoyed by it. He just held him up for way too long. And this is not the kind of match where you want to do that. You want to get Ziggler out ASAP. But otherwise, Ziggler, who, for all the problems I have with Ziggler, I will be the first to acknowledge that he is an entertaining in-ring performer, even if his psychology sucks. And he just wasn't given a whole lot to do here. And it's hard to pay attention to everybody, too. So it's like, not a whole lot of people were eliminated early on, and it just didn't seem like there were a lot of planned spots that would have helped this match be impactful. Whereas at least with the tag team match, it was a clusterfuck, but it seemed like a lot of planning went into it. This one, maybe it's because, once again, Rusev was taken out and there was a lot of last-minute changes. It just seemed very sloppy and poorly timed. Sheamus had this kind of creative bit where he couldn't get out of the pod, and everybody's like all confused. So it's making you wonder, is this real or not? And then it turns out that he had jammed it with his cross. That was pretty clever, but it was also too early for him to pull that out. He should have waited until it was just Ryback and him. That would have been really powerful on a storyline level or storytelling level, because you're thinking, well, this is how Sheamus is going to get the victory. And while it's a dirty win, it's still his win. At least he's not like needing help from anybody else. And it was a pretty smart tactic. And then if Ryback beats Sheamus, that gives him a true underdog story that is much more powerful. But no, Sheamus comes out while I think Henry and Ziggler were also still there. Ryback took some pretty notable bumps, I guess, but otherwise, it was not a very good match. And one thing too I forgot to mention: Paige needs to stop yelling that "this is my house" line. It's gotten old by now, and I only bring that up because Sheamus keeps saying, "Are you not entertained?" It's fine under the right context, but he yells that for no reason here once he first gets out. He should start yelling that after he's beating up people and getting them to really boo him. One thing with Sheamus is he yells too many random things like "fella." Why are you yelling that? I know they're trying to create like a catchphrase, but it's not a very good one. So Ryback won. I was perfectly fine with that. I think we all expected Sheamus to win, but Ryback needed a belt. He needed a direction in his career. I feel like they keep building up to be strong, but at the same time, they don't do anything with him. So maybe that will get Ryback to be relevant, and hopefully he could hold the title for a while, because the Intercontinental Championship changes hands way too often. So I'm perfectly content with him winning that. I like Ryback enough that he deserves a mid-card title for a while. I don't want to see him in the World Heavyweight Championship scene necessarily, at least anytime soon, but he's worked hard since he's returned, and I'm perfectly content with it, even though I find it weird that he's in this match when Bray is not, when Bray beat Ryback. Maybe they'll continue that storyline, even though I suspect Sheamus and him are going to have... Oh, actually, I think it's the Big Show, I've heard that they're going to have a program together. Great. I don't think that's going to be a great match. They just don't have the right kind of chemistry together, but we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. The main event. Rollins vs. Ambrose, ironically, was the one match I cannot say I was really looking forward to, just because it seemed it was too obvious that Rollins was going to win. My problem with Rollins' reign is that it feels like all of these pay-per-views are just filler for him, and they're waiting till Brock Lesnar arrives, making the majority of his title feuds seem pointless. And Ambrose just did not seem like a credible contender. But still, their storyline was all right. The problem is that it's not as good as their first storyline. When they first feuded before, there was a certain intensity. Ambrose really wanted to tear this guy apart. And I felt, even though Rollins was being cowardly by evading him, I didn't feel like he was a total chicken shit, because he seemed to be more put off by Ambrose's intensity. I'd be afraid of Ambrose too if he was that pissed off at me. And then since then, Rollins has become a traditional coward. And this time it seems like Ambrose is in more comedic mode than scary mode. And it's just not as compelling, even though this wasn't a badly developed storyline. I don't like it when they come back to these former stories this quickly, like when Jack Swagger challenged Rusev again and they had another pay-per-view match long time after they had their first feud together. This was better than that, though, so there's some silver lining there. A lot of people have been thinking, is Ambrose going to turn heel? Is Reigns going to turn heel? Thank God they have not done this yet. I'm not sure what I feel about the finish. It's a dusty finish, where technically it seems like Ambrose actually did score the win, and there's a holy shit moment there, but then because it was a different referee, it doesn't really count. So it's technically he wins, but through disqualification. But then he takes the title with him anyway. So where will they go with this? I did not like this when he did this with Barrett, a couple months ago. But I ended up enjoying the whole everybody gets in on stealing the belt from Barrett's storyline leading up to WrestleMania. So whether I like this finish or not just depends on what happens with it. I'll just have to see in the upcoming weeks. The match itself was pretty fun. Fun, fast-paced. I'm glad that they finally had the opportunity to just have a normal match with each other. When they had their first feud, I never really got that. It seemed like it was always about the gimmick, and it would get interrupted too early. So I was getting really frustrated there. And then their final match, the Hell in a Cell match, which was the end of their feud, it was more about the violence than the match itself. And while it was fine on a storytelling level, ignoring the stupid Bray interruption, still they weren't allowed to go all out as wrestling technicians. In this film, or this matchup, they were able to show a lot more of their techniques. They both looked really strong and crafty and skilled. I really enjoyed the match until the finish, and I'm just not sure about that yet. So we'll just have to see. One thing I don't like about the authority angle right now is I'm tired of seeing them screw everybody over, and it's not like in a way that I want to see them get destroyed. I just want to see them go away. I find that angle to have gotten just more depressing than anything, and there's no heat, in my opinion, because I'm so used to seeing them screw everybody over, and I just wish that would stop. So I'm tired of the authority angle. I don't know where I was going there. I'm tired of talking right now. I'm losing my voice. All in all, the Elimination Chamber had one great match, one good match, and the rest could just go away. It was an uneven pay-per-view, not as good as Payback or Extreme Rules, even though Kevin Owens versus Cena was better than I think anything these last few pay-per-views have had. I guess it's on par with Fastlane in that it's very uneven. But I'd even say Fastlane as a whole was a little bit better than this. So I was disappointed, even though the build-up to it, I was excited for it. But yeah, there was some good stuff there. So definitely watch the Cena versus Owens match if you have to watch anything here. And if you want to see something else, see the tag team match. But everything else you can just skip, in my opinion. Or if you're just a hardcore fan and you want to watch this, you have the network, go ahead. It's not horrible. It's not like the Royal Rumble in its awfulness, but this as a whole, I cannot say I was very satisfied with this pay-per-view. So that's all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.